Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, this is a channel about Dungeons and Dragons. This week we are jumping into a DM's guide. We're going to talk about Session 0, but before we get into that, we want to send a big thank you to our Patreon supporters. We love you guys. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, the link is in the description, as well as a link to our good friends at Critical Failures. We're part of a live stream game on Wednesday nights. That out of the way, we're going to talk about what is Session 0, why is it important, and how do you actually run it. Session 0. What is it? This term really gets tossed around a lot, and I don't think people really go in depth as to what it is. They say just absolutely do one, or you've probably seen thousands of guys that say, do a Session 0. It's really important for setting up your campaign, but don't go into in depth as to what that actually means. So a Session 0 is when you get your parties together and you discuss things about the campaign. This is where you kind of do your character building. A lot of times you'll have people show up with characters already ready, and in campaigns that kind of really they don't know anything about, so they built this character and they built this theme completely around. Like currently I'm part of Descent into Avernus. Being a fire draconic sorcerer is a pretty bad idea, mainly because of the resistances. It makes it so much harder for you to achieve mechanically what you're trying to do. In a campaign where you're dealing with a tremendous amount of undead, really a lot of charm magic wouldn't work. So you don't want your characters obviously to build characters, you want your players to build characters that are obviously going to have an extremely difficult uphill battle in a campaign. So what you ideally would want is tell everyone to have like a theory or an idea behind a character, but nothing set in stone yet. So they're not writing miles and miles of pages of backstory on a character that they really can't use because it's not really suitable for the campaign. And sometimes that's just the way it is. If you're playing Curse of Strahd, going poison is a horrible idea. But if you're doing Storm King's Thunder, then you know what? Poison is significantly more viable there. So those kinds of circumstances would affect a lot mechanically speaking. And that is a big component of gameplay. I think you do need to know how to play your character, and how to play your character efficiently is something that's important as far as being able to carry your own responsibilities in combat, which is as much as important dependent on your campaign, of your amount of players, of what you're kind of trying to do, as it is 1/3 of what the structure of the game is. So it is important to be able to do what you have to mechanically on all aspects that you're expected to perform in. That's kind of a little bit of a mouthful, but let me break this down a little bit easier. What a Session 0 is when you, the DM, explain a little bit of a synopsis of what you're going to be running. If you're running a homebrew campaign, you tell them a little bit of the ideas of the foundation of where they're going to be starting out. Some of the general knowledge you would want them to know or expect them to know based on their characters. Then you would work with the party, with the group, on how your characters are. Maybe they know each other already because they accepted a quest, or they're meeting in a tavern or something, or maybe a couple of characters already come from this town, and building that relationship between them so that they have an understanding even if they're not necessarily friends. This is where you can do that. This is where you can get collaboration on characters that have their own backstory and come from the same area to kind of make them what I like to call brother-sister characters, or where they're like they're siblings, where they know each other well enough and henceforth they have that connection right at the beginning. This is also really, really important for new characters or new players who have never played the game before to get to like explain what they kind of want to do and to help bridge that gap between being a novice and being a veteran. Because the great thing about the D&D community is the more you've played it, the more experienced you are, the more you understand how great it is to have a new player in the campaign, and how fostering it is to be able to help cultivate that character and help bring out these ideas, because you've probably played a class that they want to play or the subclass that they want to play, and you've probably had a lot of like learning experiences overcoming some of the issues that you will, and you can help teach that to someone and help grow that character, and it kind of like it reignites something in you, which is fantastic, and I love it. Like, I can't tell you how great it is to play with a new player. And I'll give you a quick story. I played in the campaign. It didn't end up going full all the way through. It ended up breaking down towards the end, which is unfortunate. But I played with a player who played a fighter, and this was their first game. And they put a lot of effort into their character, and they were really excited about it, and they were really into role-playing. And he played a fighter that clearly didn't know anything about magic. So when a spellcaster casts magic, it blew his mind. And he didn't know anything about the spells in the game at all, because this is the first time he's played it. And he played a martial class that wasn't going to use magic. So understanding of spells and what they did was something that was very unusual to him normally. But he cultivated that as part of his character being like a novice, not being experienced. And as someone who was playing a spellcaster, magic never felt cooler than being in the party with this person. Because it felt like yes, like I did cast Burning Hands, and it was amazing. Like it was so cool, and the descriptions of the spells really created this great opportunity that spells felt new again. Doing these abilities and these things felt so great because it was so unique to this other player's experience to see people to do these things, and as they got better and bigger spells, like wow, like that's incredible, and it fostered this great in-game relationship with the character, as well as making the game feel new again, and that's really, really important. So cultivating that is something that happens, and you can start that at ground zero, at session zero. Another important thing to do as you are DM, take notes on what characters want to do, what their backstories are like. This is where you can kind of start that, and then give yourself a time period after session zero to incorporate that into your story, or aspects of that into the characters, into the story, to make it feel more connected to each character. This gives you that buffer before the campaign actually starts. Now, you don't have to jump into someone's backstory right away, but you can sprinkle some of that stuff in to tie them. You don't even have to use the whole backstory. You just have to use some things to make their character feel like why they're here is important, and it's important because they're connected to these events from their past. Important things, other things that you should know. Don't give away the whole campaign. Try and steer characters towards builds that are effective, as opposed to builds that wouldn't be effective, because sometimes it just doesn't work. If you're doing like a real undead dungeon crawl, sway them away from enchantments and things that don't work against undead, because it's just not viable. You're not cheating, you're not breaking the campaign. You just got to make sure things work, so that way someone's not just suffering for being inadequate in certain aspects. If you're not playing a heavy combat campaign, encourage people to pick up things that are good for adventuring. If puzzle solving and understanding riddles and adventuring is really, really important, make sure to convey those ideas then, because it's important, so that way characters can really kind of fulfill that, or you can really kind of understand what aspects each player is looking forward to or is invested in, to help tailor the campaign to. Again, every campaign in a nice, healthy sense should have combat, exploration, and social kind of almost equal to each other. But if you do not have the parties that are like that, separate it, break it down to increasing the stuff that they like the most and diminishing the others, but still make them part of the game in some way, shape, or form, because you need roleplay just to hate the bad guy. You should always hate the bad guy, and you can't do that without the bad guy doing something to the party. Combat is important because it presents an obstacle that they have to mitigate to make that victory feel great. So figuring that out is what you do in session zero. Understand what their expectations are, understanding how their characters are, giving them an opportunity to build their characters together helps make things a little bit more cohesive and unique for that kind of event. That also being said, character cohesion and understanding who's gonna be who helps you to understand what kind of roles they're gonna take in the game. Like, who can you expect to be a face character, someone with a high charisma who's going to do a lot of interactions with NPCs and the like, or who's going to be more kind of withdrawn in social environments because they did not take any kind of charisma based skills or proficiency or things like that. Now, as a player, you don't have to divulge all the information about your character. I play my cards very close to the chest. I don't really tell anybody anything. I usually tell them, oh, I'm going to be this class, and that's usually it. Just so because I don't like doubling up classes if it's avoidable. But outside of that, I don't tell anyone anything else. I don't tell them my proficiencies. I don't tell them what subclass I'm planning. I don't tell them what species I'm planning unless it's apparent, like what I look like. If I was a dragonborn or something, yeah. But if I wasn't, I wouldn't share that information. My background, all that stuff, I play close to the chest because a lot of the times the characters I play have reasons for that, or they're not necessarily good people. So all that information being upfront is detrimental to them. I give all that information to the DM, but I wouldn't share that as session 0. But that's just particularly on how I like to play, because I like to keep my party in the dark, because I feel like a lot of the characters I would play would do that, because being untrustworthy or not just laying out all the cards is something crucial to the kind of nature of who they are. But you start to understand the nature of your players too, especially if you play multiple games with them. Now that you understand kind of what a session 0 is, how do you implement it, and what are some of the important things of doing that? First and foremost, what I like to do, and I think there's kind of a necessity as we go forward, like with society, to make sure that if there's anything that the players do not feel comfortable with, to definitely get that out of the way early on. Tell them, they can tell you now, or they can message you privately later, whatever they don't feel comfortable with. Obviously, you don't want someone to be uncomfortable in game. Now, a lot of people tend to be very cool because it's a fantasy setting. You don't know what things could bother someone. I happen to like evil, dark characters, so if I had to torture someone for a whole session, I can go into graphic, imaginative detail. But that might not make my friend comfortable. We can mitigate that so it doesn't have to be so grotesque and gruesome, and everyone still gets what they want out of it, and it doesn't have to be a violent 4-hour horror show. As much as I would enjoy that, some people don't. Some people don't like explicit sexual relationships. Some people like to keep it a little bit more PG-13 in that regard. You can do stuff like that. If those relationships do occur, you can always kiss fade to black. There's a lot of ways to do that that doesn't end up being harmful to the emotional state of your players. Sometimes D&D does have this tendency to cause emotional feelings of characters to come to the forefront, and that has to do a lot with the player's mentality, and it does kind of develop this kind of like reputation of being extremely therapeutic, which it absolutely can be and is definitely done, and a lot of people definitely see that, so they tend to subconsciously work through a lot of their issues and problems because they get to put it out on paper in a fantasy setting. So you never know how that might go. You don't want someone's messy emotions to be all over the place if they don't have to be, or someone to feel like they're on display like an exposed nerve. So talking that out, I think, is absolutely necessary. They don't have to say it in front of everyone. Again, I can't stress that enough. They could always message you privately, because you, as the DM, this is your responsibility. Make sure everyone's enjoying themselves. You are managing the world. You are a player in this game. You're not the enemy. You're there to kind of keep the walls up and the foundation going, so that way the story can keep developing how it's supposed to develop. Making sure everyone feels safe and everyone's comfortable and being able to have a good time is, in fact, your responsibility as well as the party's responsibility. But if it's not going that way, as a DM, you have to step in. That is going to be a very rare circumstance, but it does sometimes happen. But you do have to make sure you are prepared and comfortable enough to handle that. One of the best ways to do that is to let out these ground rules and make sure everyone understands that. That being said, once you do get that out of the way, and I think that's the first important thing that you do, get that out of the way, get that handled so that everyone has that clear understanding. Secondly, I like to give a description of the campaign. Let them know what you're getting involved into, kind of the environment, what the world is like, and some of the history that some of your characters might know based on rumors of just this existing in the world around you. And then from that, let them ask questions. The more experienced they are, the more questions they'll have. That's just something that's just going to come with it, because you kind of just don't know what questions to ask. But having one person who has an idea generally will ask the questions that people need to know. Is there anything Are we going to be fighting a specific type of monster constantly, or is it going to be a wide variety? That's a great question. Don't let questions tell the whole story for you. And questions are like, oh, are we going to be... if you feel like that answer is going to give away the story, try and change the question around into a way that you can give a little bit more vague of an answer, but still answer the question. You got to kind of like politic it a little bit, because you don't want to give away everything, especially if you're in a campaign where like there's a lot of secrets and rumors going around, or events happening that like are crucial to the game but don't happen until after you start. Definitely want to keep a lid on that, and don't let that kind of sneak out. And then after you've discussed the campaign, took some questions about it, explained some things, maybe if you happen to be in a party that really likes combat, explain things that would be important for them to know. Combats will be difficult. You guys are experienced players, so I'm going to up the combat difficulty. Things like that, would be something to kind of address at this point. How do you feel about combats? Would you like to have many combats, or would you like to have more important combats that have story-driven reason behind it, so everything feels more purposeful? Or do you want to just have like a whole sequence of dungeon crawling kind of encounters, which would depict, again, who you're kind of playing with? Min-maxers, they want a lot of combat. Role players want combat to have a reason. So depending on what you're with, you can kind of understand that. Even if they don't know where they fall into, they'll be able to kind of have an idea as to how that works. Explain the deadliness of the campaign. Is this a very deadly campaign, or is there a lot of wiggle room for you guys to make mistakes and be okay? That all depends on the campaign you're running. They all have kind of different difficulties. Now, one of the last things you would do at a session 0. Now, you don't have to follow this in chronological order. This is just kind of like the way I like to do it. The last part I like to do is character creation. If you're rolling for stats, this is when you would do it. If you're having specific classes that you don't want in your campaign or don't feel it's necessary, or you're just flat out banning for whatever reason, this would be where you do it. Popular bans include the Blood Hunter and the Artificer, for whatever reasons people might want. If people are trying to force a mystic into your campaign, shut it down. I don't know if you've ever seen that class. It was an Unearthed Arcana, and I absolutely love it. But wow, is it super corruptible and super overpowered just by itself, being a monster of abilities. But that being just, my own personal opinion, I always feel that it's always better to not take something away from a player, as opposed to giving something a new purpose, or changing the value of something. If people want to play certain classes, whatever. Like if they're going to play an artificer or artificer, depending on which one is the correct way to say it, which I kind of mess up all the time. Making magic items less common not only restricts the artificer's ability to make themselves super strong, but kind of gives this opportunity for them to need to divvy out that strength to help mitigate their power scale. A lot of times, if they just bump themselves up, they become very strong, very quick, in an insane ratio. But if you take away artificer infusions as to just being beneficial just to them, where they can just, oh yeah, we have magic items, so I can just dump all my stuff on me, having them to kind of feel like, oh, this is real bad, and spread out, that it tends to bring the class's balance a little equal to others, which I find important. But again, I'd rather not ban a class as opposed to making circumstances more beneficial to others, if that's not how they want to play. One of the things I always express, and I usually would express this here, especially if there are veteran players and non-veteran players, if your character significantly outpaces the rest of the party, I am going to give the rest of the party more magical items, so that way they can be on equal footing with you. So if you are monstrously strong, doing insane damage per round, don't expect to get the same amount of magic items as everyone else, because I need to balance it out. Otherwise, the combat encounters become a very big problem, A, for me personally, and B, for the party. And That's what I tend to do. So in my games, if you're a min-maxer, you're not being punished, but like I have to support the other people so that way they can make their way to being equal. And not to punish players for not knowing what to do, but like magic items are unique because there's always one item that fits a play style, and there are always a bunch of ways to kind of like put them together to make a strong character. So figuring out what that is based on what that character is a little bit of homework and tedious and like work. But if one player is way outpacing the others, it's not fun for some of the other players. It doesn't work out that way that like everyone feels good after combat. I mean, I've been in a game where like I've played with other people who were min-maxers, and those like one or two of them were just so, that build was just so strong. It was like, all right, let's just wait it out until he does everything in combat, and then we'll go on with the story. And combat becomes this moment where it's just like, all right, it's this player's show, so I'm just gonna sit back and just wait until it's over, and it becomes boring. And combat tends to take a long time, especially if you're fighting multiple enemies. So it becomes this like long, boring draw when one or two characters just kind of run the whole combat. And it's never as interesting or as exciting when everyone has their parts and everyone is on that equal kind of footing. It feels better, and combat moves quicker, and you're not just waiting for one person to take down the bigger monsters. You know, like it works out in a way I think feels better. So that's kind of how I face that kind of an issue. You can change it. You can do it in a multitude of different ways. Min-maxers in parties that don't all min-max tend to face this kind of weird positioning in combat. And combat being 1/3 of the game, it does have to be addressed, because you don't want to go into fighting the boss and then have one person just one-shot it, and then there's like, oh wow, we saved the world, or really we just kind of walked this guy up to the bad guy and let him do everything. Like you feel like a backup character to your own campaign, and it doesn't feel as good. So making sure everyone can feel that way and has that ability, I feel is important. So that's how I handle that issue. But during character creation, this is also a great time for you to kind of step back a little bit. This is a great opportunity for the players to all speak to themselves and speak amongst each other. You can foster that by saying, look, you're going to start out in a town square. This is where you're going to be. You're just going to happen to all be there. Why would your characters be there? This is the town we're in, and whatever, and kind of just cultivate that from there. Ask each character kind of, what were you thinking, for race first or species first, so that way you can kind of cover that, because some of the species might be the same, in which case, yeah, you guys might know each other, so maybe you want to collaborate, and really fostering that opportunity gives them the moment to kind of like, this is their time to take over, and it helps them build that comfortability between their characters, not between the players, because obviously most of the time if you're playing with friends, you know each other, or if you're online or this is a new group that none of you guys really know each other, this is a great opportunity to kind of break that ice, because it's all about, oh, well, I like this kind of a character, and then everyone's like, oh yeah, no, I love that too, and blah, 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 and you can start tearing down that just listening portion and start making them really, really active. And I feel that also kind of leaves the session kind of on a really good note, because you got like everyone has their opportunity at the end, which is going to be the thing they remember the most, and they got to talk to each other and work with each other and say, oh, I like this, oh, I like that, and like see kind of what characters automatically start to kind of build off of each other. And like you'll never know, someone just like, I really don't know what I'm looking for, and someone says, oh, I want to be from this small town and I want to be like a folk hero, I want to be someone that like helped out in that town and helped the guards. And like, you know what, I'd like to be a guard, I think that works, I was thinking of being a fighter anyway, and then boom, that's how those characters know each other. They can kind of start working with this area and what brought both of them here, and now they have two people, and now you can start the campaign between the largest group of people that know each other. or are most likely to get along with each other. And that way you have them walking into the town, so you can describe the town as these two visitors on their way to the town square, explaining why they're there as other people are there. And then whatever event occurred that could cause them to kind of reunite or unite in order to get the story going or accept a quest or whatever it is, you can play that out, and it fits really well. And the only thing you had to do to get there was listen. And that's really something that's extremely important, especially in Session 0 as a DM. Listen to what your players are saying as they're learning about the campaign, as they're learning about the setting, as they're learning about any rules you have, any rules that you think are unique or different. Like if you have flanking, but flanking is different. Like in Curse of Descent into Avernus, we have a flanking rule where you don't get advantage, you get a d4 added to your attack roll, because it works also with the enemies. We decided to give it a shot, and we're enjoying it, and it's working out really well. And it's different than just flat out advantage if you have another melee combatant on the opposite side. But those rules and everything, understanding that as they get it and they listen and they have questions and they have things that they don't like and things that they do like, you get this really important opportunity to write it all down and get into the habit of listening to what your players want. Because if you pay close enough attention, your players will tell you everything they want to do every step of the way. And that really helps you open up your game and open up your opportunity to let the characters tell the story and be active in the story as opposed to being reactive. And that's a great thing. And you get that from, again, listening to your players. With all that said and done, we're going to bring this video to a close. Absolutely run a Session 0 for every campaign you're going to do. If you're going to run a one-shot, it's really not necessary, because a one-shot is like jump in, 2 or 3 encounters, whether they be social or combat, and boom, you're done. Like that's the kind of the whole point of one-shots, for them to be quick and over. That being said, if you've made it this far, definitely tell us experiences about running Session 0s. If you played games without it, and if you felt like it hindered or if you hurt you, anything you can tell us about what you liked, or anything about being a DM in a scenario, or being a player and listening to a Session 0, whether you were like, oh, this is not the campaign for me, absolutely tell us those stories. We want to hear them. We want to better articulate what to do in all the circumstances and formats. Big thank you to our Patreon supporters. We love you guys. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. A big thank you to good friends at Critical Failures, where we're part of a live stream game on Wednesday nights. If you're interested in either one of those, the link to both is in our description. And thank you for giving a spooky kid a chance.